Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Garson, and we are live with Collective Rewilding at the moment. We're waiting for a few people to join us in the conversation, and of course, also waiting for our guest, Paul Rosero, to join in and connect. We're very happy to start this series of conversations with our guest, Paul Rosero, who will be telling us today more about hello, Paul. Here he is. He will tell us more about plant intelligence and plant creativity, which is a topic that for us has been fascinating to think about, as you know, much of our work here at Collective Rewilding has to do with thinking about ways of making curatorial practices and museum practices at large size for collective rewilding, right? And that just made it seem that thinking through plant intelligence as it foregrounds new methods of being, a particular kind of vegetal politics, and so on, would make a lot of sense for thinking with agents beyond the human for these kinds of practices of care and repair that we are so interested in thinking with and alongside. Here he is. Hi, Paul.
Hi, hello. Thank you so much. I don't know if do you see me well and do you hear me well?
I do, yes.
Okay,
So
cool.
you're good, yes.
Okay, cool.
So just before we start a conversation, I just kind of want to continue telling people a little bit more about what our conversation is about, and how this would be also the first of a two-series kind of part conversation about the very idea of plant intelligence and plant creativity, thinking methodologically about other ways of enacting the kind of cultural agenda for other ways of for grounding structures of care and repair. Now, our conversation today is actually also based on Paul Rosero's most recent publication, which he featured in the Colección Patricia de Cisneros online platform, and which bear the name "The Revolution Will Start in the Garden: Politics of Representation and Vegetal Intelligences," which I find very thought-provoking. I actually had the opportunity of reading this text just before it got published, and it has been ever since then, a few months ago, that this idea of this kind of provocation for thinking about the possibility of a revolution starting in the garden is really stuck with me. I've been really carrying that with me through the work that I've been doing ever since then. And I thought that would be, and this would make a great opportunity to start a conversation about not only what plant intelligence entails, how it expands the very definition of intelligence or human intelligence, but more specifically, which will be the topic of today's conversation, is what is plant creativity? Really, how do we envision this idea of plants also being at the forefront of creating, designing, and shaping the world around us, right? How do they really enable a form of world making that has actually made us humans live in the world of plants and not the other way around, not plants living in the human-made world? In that context, I thought from this text that Paul wrote, that the idea advanced by Canadian anthropologists Natasha Myers was really interesting, where he actually talks about the Planthropocene, right? So the kind of geological age of plants, and how that contrasts other conversations about our geological age, such as the Anthropocene, and kind of countering that, the Plantationocene, which I think that I just saw Annalie Davis, and that reminds me that not too long ago, a Collective Rewilding posted a term post, which is a way for us to signal larger conversations around particular kinds of terms. And the Plantationocene is different from the Anthropocene in that, of course, it recognizes the role that colonialism and extractivism have played in the so-called geological age of human action. Now, what characterizes those two, or unites those two kind of approaches to climate change and environmental destruction, is precisely how much they foreground an idea, like a very anthropocentric framework, right? And so the idea of the Planthropocene, I thought, was quite fascinating as well, because it actually helps us reposition and decenter the human from our relationship to nature. So that's one concept that I think is going to be like an overarching concept for us today, Paul, and that I would like us to better flesh out. But more importantly, I think that it fleshes itself out in the context that and really helps us think about plant creativity, creation, cognition, and forms of representation that really help us move away from simply using nature, specifically plants, as the object of our representation. As we have seen in contemporary art, there has been a kind of a ubiquitous use of yes, an interest for the natural world, whether that is representations that are a lot more anthropogenic, right? Representations that advance ideas of extractivism and destruction, as much as those representations that actually kind of reinscribe the natural world as a kind of pristine agent that has all of these kind of powerful capacities. Both representations, nevertheless, are always seen and projected through the human gaze. So what's interesting to me about the Planthropocene and this kind of decentering of the human gaze is also to recognize that plants and gardens, themselves can be artists, right? That we can allocate to the world of the vegetable world, also the places that we have kind of allocated exclusively to human creation, such as galleries and museums, and place the vegetal world as those agents of creation as well. And in that, in coming into terms with the possibility of plants to create and enact the world around us, we also become entangled in what, Paul, you wrote in this text, which I thought was quite interesting, this idea of transcorporeality, of becoming with and engaging in the body and emulating the kind of bodily capacities of plants. And this idea of emulating and embodying actually speaks to the kind of robust scholarship that has been developed around plant intelligence in the last several decades by anthropologists and scholars of science and technology, where they have actually looked into frameworks of plant intelligence for, making possible new ways of, say, for example, political action, right, or social human organization that really looks at how plants adapt and are becoming resilient and explore the difficult terrain of life and death, advancing possibilities of human societies and human organizing that can do very similar things if we are able to, like I said, become more acquainted and more entangled with forms of, forms of creation of plants and forms in which the plants are also enacting these possibilities of being in the world otherwise. So with that, this is just kind of a little bit of a framework of today's conversation. I wanted to invite Paul to tell us more about his own artistic practice. I understand that he has been invested in the research of plant intelligence and plant creativity for a long time. And maybe I would love to have the opportunity to maybe touch upon some of those earlier projects and how they really kind of come together in your own relationship with the vegetal world. So before you start, I want to introduce you to people in case they don't already know you. Paul Rosero is an Ecuadorian multimedia artist and researcher. He's working in the intersection of experimental arts and natural sciences. His body of work explores topics related to geopolitics, environmental issues, interspecies reciprocity, and experimentation on future sustainable settings. Usually going out on explorations to remote places. His projects include doses of speculative realism, scientific data, and fictional narratives. Paul's work has been displayed widely in the forms of audiovisual installations, short films, biological sculptures, and public talks. He has taken part in major art events and venues such as the 57th Venice Biennale and in the Antarctic Pavilion, the 5th Moscow Biennale for Young Art, the 1st Antarctic Biennale, the 1st and 2nd Bienal Sur, and the 11th Cuenca Biennale, and the SIGGRAPH conference in Los Angeles, among many more. He's also been the recipient of a number of awards and prizes, like the National Award for the Arts in Ecuador and the Paris Award of the 11th Cuenca Biennale. So, Paul, thank you again for joining us in this conversation. And I also know that we're going to show a few pictures, so I hope to be able to help you navigate those.
Okay, thank you so much, Sarah. First of all, I want to thank for the invitation to have this talk. I also want to thank to your colleagues at Collective Rewilding. I don't have the pleasure to meet them yet, but I know you three work together. So hi to them. And also, I want to thank especially to the Cisneros collection, Satoshi and Victor, who help us during the publication of this article last year. So this talk, let's say, it's a a consequence of this publication. So thank you so much as well to the Collections Cisneros. And yes, okay, so let's start. Thank you so much for that presentation and the introduction. I think it's very insightful. Well, I have a structure to talk about these topics. We want to keep it in 1 hour. This will be a very long conversation, but let's say I prepared 3 parts within this structure. And I'm gonna use these slides to explain how I see this relationship or this idea of plant-human conspiration in terms of Natasha Myers, no? Mm-hmm. So first, the first part I want to introduce is the framework, is the kind of projects that I've been working in during the last years, probably almost a decade ago. So I want to show this first one, which is called Anticipation to an Absence. This is a very experimental project in which I wanted to experiment a cooperation between different kind of materials, one related to artificiality and the other one related to the organic world. So what you're seeing right now is an artificial living forest, which is a mix of plastic called PLA, which is a filament used in the 3D printing fabrication process, and is mixed along with a lion's mane fungi, which is a sort of a fungi, a mushroom that is eatable and has this particularity that, you know, when you see, it looks like thin hair. So in the mix with this plastic, I wanted obviously to create this experiment in hybridity, but also I was exploring the way how the relationship between subject and object can get subverted. So I wanted to experiment with a piece, an object, and a sculpture, a cultural object, let's say, that is alive instead of passive, right? That has this capacity to change over time. So for the creation of this project, I built a machine, kind of a homemade biological 3D printer, to mix these both materials. Okay, so what I wanted to introduce in this case is the idea of technology as some sort of tool for creation rather than a tool for extraction or destruction, right? Which is the main use of machines or technology in the extractivism, let's say, paradigm, right? When you think in extraction, in oil extraction or deforestation or this kind of industries, you're always got this image of a machine, let's say a caterpillar or a big truck, something that is digging, something that is cutting trees down, etc., right? So I wanted to introduce this idea of a sort of technology for hope, a sort of technology that creates life rather than, you know, kills something alive. In this sense, I focus. You can go to the previous slide, please. I wanted to focus during this time in this part of the Amazonian jungle, which belongs to the Ecuadorian state, you know, just because of limits and so on. Which is called Yasuní National Park. The Yasuní National Park is a very interesting place here because it's a reserve, but it's a sort of paradox because it's a reserve where there's different oil fields that, you know, are under exploitation. During the last decade, during the last government, there was this project to try to keep oil underground, and this was a project proposed to to different countries, let's say Germany, the United States, etc., to try to pay to keep this oil underground, right? So it was a proposal, very ecological, let's say, within the framework of environment conservation, that finally failed. So the government couldn't, you know, sell this sort of bonus to keep the oil underground and not explode it. So finally, the exploitation of oil in this area kept going, and actually, you know, it expanded. So the project, I wanted to emphasize in this idea of something that is in the near future to disappear, you know, something that is in the way to get lost, and that's the reason for the title. So in this case, you know, I've been researching for I don't know how many years these consequences of extractivism in these kind of places, let's say the Amazon region or the Galapagos Island. And in this case, it's related obviously with oil exploitation and closely related to Texaco, which was this industry before Chevron. What is Chevron right now? It was Texaco before, right? Mm-hmm. So I've been researching in this place for, I don't know, almost a decade. And this one was one of the experiments that came out of this research, right? How to produce a hybrid forest that responds to this process of extraction, this process of transformation in the land, and how, you know, you can go beyond the idea of catastrophic consequences or actually the idea in which the Anthropocene is based on, you know, which is totally chaos, totally destruction, etc. I never really liked that concept, so I always try to think on ideas on what I call post-Anthropocene, something that is more futuristic, let's say. Mm-hmm. And in this process, I found, you know, theories and concepts as the Plantropocene that you mentioned before, and I want to develop it later. Okay, so you can.
Okay.
So let's.
Do you want me to go back to this one, or should we go?
Plants or fungi. So okay, so let's go to the next one. This is the machine. Okay, this is the Bio 3D printer, and this is the place in Lago Agrio, Ecuador, where I've been researching for a while and trying to apply this idea of bioremediation, following this desire of in thinking on hope rather than thinking in destruction. That why I'm talking about this, you know. I think it's easier to dream the end of the war rather than dreaming the end of capitalism, right? So from that perspective, this research focus on relational ontologies, in which, you know, there's an importance, very, very high importance on other than human contributions, other than human beings that, you know, are part of a cosmovision that I'm living in or that I am part in as a mestizo, right? So that's why I'm already invested in these ideas or this relationship, deep relationship between what Marisol de la Cadena called earth beings and humans, right? I used to try to avoid the word nature to talk about this, you know, because nature implies already a human construction. Okay, so let's call them beings, yeah, like earth beings. It's like a forest, you know, like animals, etc. So this is the place, and I've been researching with fungi, with mushrooms able to break down hydrocarbon derivatives in order to get the carbon source to grow up. So mushrooms or fungi in general have a very high potential to metabolize toxic elements, right? So in this sense, I started working with mushrooms and oil back in the time. Then, you know, I'm gonna show the idea, or the previous idea is also the work or the relationship between fungi and plastics, which is also an oil derivative, right? And how, you know, bring out something that is a third element, something that you know, gets born out of this interdependence, let's say. Okay, so we can continue, please. So in this process, I also been experimenting with other kind of biofilters. In this case, sponges. Okay, so out of this research in Lago Agrio, I found different coffee trees growing out of these contaminated lands, out of this contaminated soil. So, you know, here is where it comes this idea of resilience, of how air beings have this super incredible energy and power to overcome some things. Okay, so in this project, what I wanted to try is mostly a sort of challenge to people to drink this coffee coming out of these lands, contaminated lands, you know, contaminated by the Ex-Texaco, which is a company based in the States. So I put this coffee machine in a show in Los Angeles with a person serving the coffee to people that are aware of where this coffee coming from and what are they about to try. So it was this kind of challenge to take, you know, the red pill or the blue pill, you know, and go far post-human or try to keep conservative, you know. So this was another experiment on that thing, you know, this kind of biofiltered coffee machine that serves this contaminated coffee as a performance, some sort of thing. Okay. So that's another piece.
Okay, that's very interesting. So can you remind me of the years? What years are this is work?
Okay, the first piece, the artificial forest, is I started that one 2013. Then the previous one, I think it was 2016.
Okay.
This one is also, this is a sketch of kind of a bioremediated forest that I've been working for a while, in which the forest is able to produce sound. So, so what you see here is these trunks that are actually a mix of different materials. It's a hybrid object coming also from these contaminated, all contaminated lands, soils in the Amazon. So this is a project in which I've been, you know, researching also for a while. This is a connection to another project that I did before, in which I was recording different sounds from different places, like icebergs in Antarctica, for instance, or the glaciers in the Los Andes mountain range, by using these vibration sensors. So basically, you go to the natural frequency of different matters, right? And you extract this kind of fundamental voice that everything has. Okay. So in this sense, you know, I'm getting to this in the second part, in which I use some other notions. The notion, for instance, of animism, right? The notion of animism, in which you try to experiment a different experience, a different relation to different things, either passive or active, right? And as you said, in this process or in this experiment, instead of applying a sort of anthropomorphism to the entity, let's say to the plant, let's say to the volcano, I'm trying, instead of that, I'm trying to vegetalize myself into that plant that I'm researching, or in this case, into the earth being that is the mountain, right?
Okay.
The earth being as an entity that are also the mountains. Okay, so in this process, I think I connected a lot with this notion of Planthropocene, right? Because in somehow the Planthropocene, proposes this hybrid, this hybrid or these conspirations, plant-human conspirations, in which you become someone, you become a being. In parallel that the other entity becomes a being. It's not that you lost your individuality or you lost your agency, but the process of almost, let's say, multidimensional process of becoming happens in both sides.
That's right. Yes. And I just wanted to interject that and to also expound a little bit on this concept of transpiring, right? Of conspiration, like you call it, right? Because it actually alludes to thinking about plants as machines that are constantly respiring and intaking carbon dioxide while, of course, breathing out oxygen. And so the transpiration of the plant is one of the things that have become quite a foundational concept for thinking with plants, right? So conspiration of being with and conspiring, so to speak, like it's a play of words that Natasha Myers advances, and I find it very poetic and political too, right? How to become conspirators together in a need for co-flourishing, in a moment for flourishing together that goes back to the very fundamentals of breathing, right? So I just wanted to interject by expanding on that concept, which is so poetic.
Okay, yeah, you're right, because when Natasha Myers talked about this conspiration, she used the idea of aspire, right? In relationship to breathe, right? And the possibility of breathing that comes to us because of photosynthesis, right? That is made out of plants or out of marine microbes, cyanobacteria and so on. So let me quote her, okay? She used to say this, which is cool. I like it. She said, "The recognition that plants are breathing us into being, that their exhaling is the possibility of our inhale." Okay? So as far as they breathe out, as far as they exhale, we can inhale. Okay? So we can say that the relationship between plant and human is one-way dependent, because we are the dependents on them, right? And from the other side, plants have followers, You have people that are, activating or taking care of this piece of land, and this piece of land have this kind of trees, this kind of plant, this kind of animals. So these kind of people are followers to these specific plants, So that's the relationship, not the other way around. So I love that, I love the idea of always try to put the conditions to decenter the human, right? That's one of the main objects. Let's say when you put, I guess, when you put the name to your collective, rewilding, somehow you are also applying the idea of decentering the human, try to use another kind of axis, right? Yeah. So I find in this situation, these experiences, the possibility of this decentration, right? Yeah. And actually, that's why I reject to use the Anthropocene notion always, because for me it's so anthropocentric.
Yeah.
It's always recentering the human, right? As that force able to destroy and also to restore. You know, it's kind of, it's kind of paradoxical. Okay. So from this idea, you can okay, go. Okay, so this is the third part, right? So from this idea, we are talking about on the chance, talking on the chance of kind of redistribute the attribution of agency in a context that, for me, that interesting me, this move is in the context of representation,
yeah.
right? Or in the context of as well, in the context of presence, in the context of identity. So what you're seeing right now, this project is a project in which I work with a cacao plant, which is endemic from Ecuador. After studying a lot, scientists have found that the first use of cacao to produce chocolate was in Ecuador, actually, not in Mesoamerica, what was believed before. So I did this project for the Antarctic Biennale. This is a sort of migrant plant. No, this is a traveler that I had to find a visa for her, right? to move it from.
I'm just gonna put this image for a second. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to move her. I know there's a few images like that one.
I know.
I think
just to talk about her for a second, but we can go back.
Okay, so in this case, is a travel in which I try to create the experience of this tree moving on the axis south north instead of going east west, right? Because when the colonizers came over, they took the cacao trees and the seeds and everything all the way back to Europe and then to Africa. Okay, so Ivory Coast is right now the biggest producer of kind of low quality cacao, right? So all these brands, Hershey's, blah blah blah, all these chocolates is produced with using this chocolate from there, okay, right? But the characteristic is because we share same, let's say the same altitude, right? Is around the equatorial line. So in this case, I wanted to try if this tree, is able to travel along with me to Antarctica, to the South Pole, back and forth from the center of the world, and then to start another trip up to the North Pole, right? So this is the first part of this project, in which this plant went all the way down to Antarctica and came back to Ecuador. So the plant is actually right now with me here. I have it here in my plate.
I love it. Uh-huh.
And is alive, right? So this plant, as an astronaut, as a diver, needs a suit, needs a technology to keep it alive, So that's the capsule. So that capsule, for me is the device that allows her to be alive, but also is a sort of time machine, because this was a proposal about deep time in which you don't know exactly what's going to happen in the future, but we know that in the past, Antarctica and Australia were attached to each other, and you can find subtropical flora and fauna over there. So I placed the tree in a bay called Paradise Bay, where these kind of fossils were found in the past. Okay. So the idea was also a sort of time clash between past, present, and future. Okay, so this project is also embedded in all these ideas, right? About agency, about thinking about plants not as resources, not as something that you eat, but something that is a being, you know, and could even be a persona, you know, the construction of a persona in a tree is something that I also love. Okay, so we can go, we can go beyond. So this project includes a chocolate bar that I produce under the support of a very known company here that only use this high quality cacao to produce this kind of chocolate, which is very, let's say, very fine. You know, this is very nice. It's kind of dark chocolate, 100%, 80%. This one is 72% pure. Okay, so in this chocolate bar, there was this poem, this text related actually to this idea of time, no?
So it reads, what a new tree will be born out of the glaciers into the vertigo of eternity. Right? Beautiful.
Yes. Yes, so in this project, I want to try this experience as sort of multisensorial thing, in which the people on board of this ship, in which we were, you know, traveling around the Antarctic Peninsula, first during the breakfast, I played the sound of the harvesting of this chocolate, you know, here in Ecuador. So you know, I wanted to create this out of context situation, kind of very weird, in which you are surrounded by glaciers, but listening to Amazon birds and this kind of fauna and flora. So people were kind of, what is this sound? You know, what is this? So after that first step, I introduced the project. Right, I said, okay, this is the first part of the project, which is a performance that I'm proposing in 3 steps. The first step is the sound. The second step is the chocolate. So you need to eat the piece first before seeing it. And the third step is go out and see the installation, which is the plant in this glacier in Paradise Bay. So people, you know, got this. I wanted to, you know, to have these 3 stimuli happening at the same time, right? When you try something that melts down as ice in your mouth already, and at the same time you are seeing what is this chocolate coming from, but not in the context, in a totally different world, right? Yeah. So when I propose these kind of things, going back to the topic of the text, I want to try this idea of creating worlds, or the idea of the chance to have different worlds within the world, right? Yeah. This is more or less the aim, the chance to produce this image, which can be taken as utopic or whatever, but in my case, I saw this image of a tree coming out of a glacier, because I had this trip before to Antarctica before this trip, and I saw the need of greenhouses there, for instance, right? Yeah. And I saw how people survive there, what kind of food we had to eat during a month, right? Frozen food for months, etc., etc. So the idea of a possibility embedded in an image is actually a political statement. Right. That's at the end of the night, right? Yeah. Okay.
And one of the things that I also recall from the text, and that also draws back to the very concept of plant creativity, has precisely to do with memory. And memory as the one thing that enables the very idea of creation and creativity. And in memory, which is also tied to creations of imagination, is precisely this potentializing of what is possible outside of what we think is real or not real, right? Right. So it's about, like you said, like producing the possibility of something that seemed quite unnatural to do, you know, you do a play of words here, quite unnatural to a particular kind of ecosystem that would seem out of place even, right? And how do we, by invoking those possibilities, those imaginations becomes realities, and how the plant itself as a bearer of memory can therefore also start enacting a particular kind of not only agency, but world making possibility, like you said, right? Of bringing the world into being through certain kinds of characteristics and sort of kind of stimuli and sensible relations that can enable a living otherwise or a flourishing otherwise in terrains that are quite difficult. In the context of Antarctica, of course, it's about the temperature, right? And the kinds of things that grow and don't grow in these kind of areas. But in other instances, it's about toxicity and how those climates and ecosystems have been polluted, whether, I think this is also something you touched upon in another text, whether naturally self-polluting or polluted by human action and so on. Plants seem to have always the capacity to contest and to resist and to flourish in adverse scenarios. So this is quite beautiful because I feel like this is where imagination, world-making practices, and resilience all come together through looking at plant intelligence and plant forms of evocation of the world.
Yes, you're right. So you just touched the word memory, right? So we can kind of go deeper in this idea because that idea is related to the brain. And also is related to this proposal of what is thinking in the article, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's something that I wanted to talk a little bit also. Even when it's a huge topic, okay? But let's try to talk a little bit.
Yeah.
So in the text, what is already published, and I hope people have the chance to read. I really love it. I really love the acceptance of the text. So that's why I'm very grateful with the Cisneros platform because it's very.
And I just want to say that
big.
if people are interested in reading it, it's also it's linked in our bio on Collective Rewilding, but it's also now being promoted through the Colección Patricia Flor de Cisneros' Instagram account. So you can go to either of those and get a direct link to the text, which I really, really recommend.
Yes. Okay. So let's go to the idea of thinking, right, or memory, or how memory is actually distributed along the body and not belongs only to the brain.
Yeah.
So I started working with these ideas coming from neurobiology. I studied cognitive science back in the years, and also because of Merleau-Ponty's phenomenology, right? In which there's this notion of touch, right? You become one as far as you allow the outside gets kind of you allow the outside to touch you, and in this process you become as far as you let this door open, right?
Yeah, it also reminds me of like skin as a permeable, like it's so permeable, letting the outside in.
Porous.
Right? Porous.
Porous. Yes. Okay. So when you get into these topics, you easily understand that thinking is not an exercise of the brain, but of the body completely, right? That there's this thing called body memory, body learning, which is practice after exercise or after repetition. Mm-hmm. So you can see this very easily in athletes. For instance, someone who plays baseball, is trained to hit a ball that comes extremely fast on the space, and you need to hit it in this precise spot on time and space, right? How you do that? You don't calculate with your brain how fast the ball is flying to you. You don't do that. Mm-hmm. It's your brain who knows when is the exact time to play it. Yeah. When is the exact time to hit it. Okay? So I wanted to explore in the article the idea of a shared memory with different entities, different beings, through the idea of water. So there's a excerpt, a part in the text in which I talk about memory of water. Okay, so in that sense, I wanted to experiment, these notions of memory, these notions of learning, these notions of intelligence at the end of the night, you know, because intelligence is something that has been framed within a paradigm of you know, learning or memorizing, you know. So when you take an intelligence test, you know, there's kind of a few things that you have to try, right? Kind of logics, mathematics, and so on. Okay, but when we talk about intelligence in other beings, you don't talk about logics, right? You can see other things that are kind of a different knowledge. Okay, so from that perspective, I see that we are a very limited beings. We are as humans, we are very limited because we are not able to talk to species or to beings, because the idea of the species is also kind of colonial. But you know, we tend to understand some other languages from our human perspective, right? But when you can, you know, chat or start some sort of communication with a bird, you know, the bird is repeating you and is following you, but the bird is coming from a perspective of not knowing, or a non knowing that is not open to us. So I wanted to kind of explore these limits of knowing, and also the limits of knowing are mediated by the limits of language, right? If you don't talk the same language as this one, probably you cannot interact. But the thing is that the language is not already made; it's something that you need to develop. Okay, so in that sense, I wanted to further explore these ideas. For instance, there's this bio-neurologist, Stefano Mancuso, an Italian researcher, who studies the neurology of plants, right? So he used to say that when he first started, his colleagues, you know, made jokes of him. You know, what is this neurology of plants? Neurology is based on neurons. Plants don't have neurons, so what are you talking about? You know. So he said, okay, I'm just using the kind of the framework of this kind of study, neurological studies, to apply this idea to plants. But I know that plants don't have a brain. The brain is distributed along the body. So the plant thinks with the roots, with the trunk, with the leaves, etc. Yeah. So the plant gets affected if you cut the leaf or if you cut the root. So I love this idea, you know. I love this idea, and I started researching on this kind of plants that can show that thing very easily. These kind of plants are, for instance, the Mimosa pubica. The Mimosa pubica is this plant that you touch and immediately close their leaves. Okay. You know. Okay. So that thing shows you that being is aware of you. You know, there's a sort of consciousness there. Yeah. Yeah. So I think this is probably one of the most difficult parts of this research. You know, to try to understand this idea of plants know that you are here. Yeah. You know, a forest know when you walk around. You know. Yeah.
That's really beautiful, because Natasha was also talking about how sometimes you walk down the street and let's say you're walking and there's a few, you know, trees planted and you think they're just there, somewhat like a decoration, but they know that you're there. They start sensing you, they start reacting around you. They're very smart because they're also watching you over. So it's this idea that now that we go out into the world, we have to be continuously, you know, in the recognition that we are being watched by plants and they are like really adapting themselves and their behaviors to other people's presence. And it was just us that we're so far away from being attuned to their own form of cognition and are less so perceptible of their presence and their, you know, forms of evocation. So that's quite beautiful.
Exactly. Yeah. So, you know, based on this, you know, you can, as you said, you can notice that there's a multiple relationships with plants. You can use them as alimentation, you can use it as company, as an ornament, something that you take care of, or something that you actually realize that is the source for your breeding. So in this line, I thought, what about the creativity? Let's go to that part, yes. Right? What about, plants as these entities that have been terraforming the planet way before the human existence, right? So the idea of plants as creators is out there. Is something that you need just to see, but sometimes we don't see it, right? Because there's a lot of distraction. Let's say that the city is the distraction that puts you a blocking, not allowing you to see this kind of creation. But when you go out, if you go out a little bit to the mountain, to an island, to different places, you start noticing this thing. Okay, so I wanted to use these notions in this project called El Pensamiento de las Plantas, right? Which is the one that is the main focus of the article and what we're watching right now. So what was my point here? I wanted to kind of explore all these ideas, all these anthropology, contemporary anthropology, philosophy, and so on, but not as theory, because this is at the end, if you don't apply this thing, is theory. So I wanted to kind of use this theory in a practical way. So I said, okay, this project is about a forest as an image maker. I don't know if it's a photographer or as I don't know what kind of image maker. So that was the starting point, right? So I found out about this experiment in this royal garden in London, in the Summit, I think. I just forgot the name of this place, in which they created this device. Is a bio-powered small camera that reacts this camera takes a picture when the battery gets charged after kind of accumulating the biological waste of these plants. So the plant is powered by the same waste of the tree, and as soon as it gets charged, it takes a selfie of the tree. So it's a sort of plant selfie. So I said, okay, I like this, and this is a project that you can apply to trap cameras, these kind of cameras that you place in trees and you leave, but the batteries runs out, and the camera stop working. So this is a sort of response to that problem during scientific research in the field, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. So I decided, okay, I gotta use this point of view of trees as image makers, and I'm gonna focus on a specific history and a specific story related to this accident that happened in Guyana in the rainforest, right? So the project tells the story of this filmmaker called Dieter Plasch, named Dieter Plasch, who was a nature documentarist from Germany, who is the one who showed the first movies from Africa, the relationship between big monkeys and humans, etc. So he helped to raise this sort of consciousness about conservation during the 20th century, okay. Right? Which is a century very important in the transformation of these ideas related to human-environment relationships, right? In the beginning of the century, everybody was hunting, still hunting and eating everywhere, everything around. During the 60s, 70s, there's already laws against that practice, right? And I studied this case in Galapagos specifically. So the movie, this film I have called Dark Paradise, Humans in Galapagos, tells this story, right? From Germans hunting turtles and eating them right away to, you know, these kind of initiatives to take care about the archipelago, etc. So let's go back to this, right? So I started doing this, kind of putting together all this idea, right? Agency, non-human point of view, plants and trees as image makers, and also the possibility of a selfie, a non-human selfie, right? So this is the series of photographs that relates the trip of Dieter Plasch, this filmmaker, on the canopy of this rainforest in Guyana, on board of a hot balloon, a sort of what's the name? A Zeppelin, right? Which was a Zeppelin, custom made for him, only for one person, to explore the canopy of the forests, right? We are talking about a time before drones, okay? So right now with a drone, let's say, it's not that difficult to take these images, but back in the days, you needed another device. In this case, this hot air balloon. So this story ended up tragically, because the balloon, during the shooting, Dieter Plasch was shooting alone on board, and the balloon got stuck with a tree. And he tried to free the device and keep the movie going. And let's say from a perspective of a filmmaker, you know, that is, it needs to take advantage of the situation and probably forgetting a little bit about precaution, right? So instead of putting the camera out or something, he kept, you know, the work and fell down, right? And passed away. Okay? So this story is told also in a movie. But the movie focuses on the traumatic experience for this British engineer that built the hot balloon. Yeah.
Well,
and
I just want to say that we have 2
accident.
more minutes, so we need to end quickly before we get cut off.
Okay, thank you. I was about to ask you. Okay, so in this sense, this project is about the trees as witnessing the accident, you know, and the trees kind of recording in a memory of water the accident, how happened, you know, how it happened. And so this series of pictures are kind of a chronological recount of this accident. So you can go back and you will see these ones are kind of the fall, during the fall. Yes. And the next one, one of the last ones, you can go for, let's say this is falling, and this is the guy. So I want to finish with this image, okay? And the next one. This is Dieter Plasch. This is a sort of portrait taken by the object of study to the subject who is studying. Yeah, is the response of a vision, which is an idea that I've been developing from the past. The response of a vision. And kind of the idea of reciprocity in image making, okay? And this object is a replica of the hot balloon used for this project by Dieter Plasch. Is scaled down, but it's the very same one, which is based on the design of the one that they use for Guyana.
That's amazing.
So,
okay, Paul, I'm thinking we're going to cut off in any second. I just wanted to use this last second to thank you for this amazing talk. You have given us so much to think about. It's so thought-provoking, and hopefully we'll be able to follow up with a turn post or something that can actually, wrap up some of these concepts. But in the meantime, I just wanted to express my gratitude to you and, for this amazing presentation, especially for the thought-provoking idea of thinking through plant creativity, plant image, the capacity to also hold, retain, and be in conversations or relationships of reciprocity related to this idea of memory, of capturing, and of representing the world in front of us so that we can come into contact with them and their ways of world making, as opposed to always continues to pretend that they are part of the man-made world around us.
Thank you so much. My pleasure. I'm always open to collaborate, and thank you so much to the audience, the people who were able to connect to us.
Definitely. And if anyone has any questions, we look forward to being able to continue this conversation on Instagram, online, and through the various things that we're doing. So again, thank you, Paul.
Thank you to you. Bye-bye.
Bye.